The purpose of the previous meetings and stakeholder groups and such has been to gather all the data that goes into an assessment. So our consultant, Kimley Horn and Apex, have been working on this putting together all of this data and feedback on what our current transportation plan, our current transportation system is comprised of and where the weaknesses are. And tonight we really shift gears. Tonight is more about the future and planning for the future, determining what our values as a community are as they relate to transportation and what those goals and strategies for transportation should be. So we've put together a number of exercises to get at that, and this is all with the intent of providing council and staff and into the future direction on the types of projects we should be constructing in Golden. What transportation projects are the priority? What programs for transportation are our priorities as a community? So that's really the focus of this, and I'll just turn it over to Troy Russ from Kimley Horn, and he'll walk you through for a few minutes before we turn you loose on the exercises.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm going to drift over here so I can advance the slides. It's really about the screen, not me, so don't worry about it. So yes, as Rick was saying, this is the second community meeting, but we've been busy working with city staff on the transportation plan. Let me escape out of one thing and advance the slides. So tonight we're going to quickly remind you what the intent of the transportation master plan is, quickly go over the outreach and what we've heard, and then go into our assessment of the city of Golden and its transportation system very quickly. And from that, hopefully it'll frame the conversation. Hopefully you agree, yeah, that sort of makes sense. If you have any concerns from our assessment of your transportation system, bring it up. This is meant to be an independent audit from what the Denver Regional Council of Governments, the city, Colorado Department of Transportation, how they look at the transportation system in Golden. We're sort of coming in at a completely different level and auditing it so that then we know some deficiencies, and then together we can outline two things. One, vision and goals and objective, which is really critical to the budgeting process. It's kind of wonky to say the least, but we need to give council and the Planning Commission guidance on how they prioritize their projects. Because this is a 5 to 10 year vision that gets updated, and it's based on the core values of the community that will measure each project. So when you think of projects, we need to talk about the core values of the community. Secondly, then we're going to go into the exercises of really about project identification and budgeting, and put you in sort of where town council or city council has to sit as they prioritize projects. There's actually, suddenly transportation has to compete with a whole world of issues, parks and rec, housing, zoning, and others. So when they prioritize their budget, they have to make tough decisions citywide. Sort of get you in that framework, but it also tells us how you look and want to budget your priorities. So really quickly, from a project introduction, what is a transportation investment? What is a transportation master plan? Well, it's an investment strategy. It's telling city council how to prioritize your projects for the next 5 years. So when they have to make tough decisions at the budgeting time, which projects make the most sense and how do you invest it to accomplish the biggest transportation goals of the community? That's really, in essence, what a transportation plan is. But reminding you where transportation fits in what city council has to deal with. Of all the different agencies in the city, only one, besides the city manager, sort of looks at the city holistically. Right, so this is, you have your community vision, and then you have all these different policies that the city council has to deal with. Transportation is but one, the second from the top in this one. Blue may not have been the best color to choose. But from that, they take, as I was saying, the fiscal health of the city, housing, parks and rec, community character and urban design, and they have to prioritize those for specific actions. And they do that through the municipal code, design standards, facility master plans, capital improvement plans, budgeting. There's all sorts of how they filter through and what projects compete against, right? So if you look at just transportation, there's a lot to transportation. Vehicle circulation, pedestrian circulation, the American with Disabilities Act, or accessibility of the community, bike circulation, transit circulation, safety. All of those are the things that are obviously influence transportation, and they go all out into every aspect of the city's implementation, from the municipal code to the budgeting process. So this TMP will provide a long-term multimodal transportation plan for the city. It'll function as a 5 to 7 year roadmap on how do you prioritize projects. It'll outline future transportation investments. Those are specific projects and for improving safety, mobility, access for all modes of travel while minimizing congestion and impacts. It's sort of balancing it out. So it does address projects. It strikes a balance between community livability and mobility. They sometimes compete. And we have to sort of, this job is transportation, fitting within the city of Golden. And then obviously being disciplined and constrained by the city's budget. How do you budget this? We don't have enough money for all the challenges within the community. So how do we start to do that within the fiscal resources of the city? So what outreach have we done? We've been out to the Golden Gallop. We've been to the farmers market in October. We did our first workshop with the community in December. We did focus group meetings in January and February for businesses, neighborhood, staff, and also what we call mobility partners between the Redevelopment Authority, RTD, CDOT, the school districts, all the different partners in building a better Golden. We have tonight's workshop, and then we have not two farmers market. I didn't delete the second one. We're going to go back to the farmers, not the famers, market and get that done. But we also have different ways of outreach, and this was a great comment we received in this kind of guiding our transportation strategy. One of the comments we received is, I hope you're considering cycling while you make your plans. The placement of this sign, considering the subject, was a real, I put the word in bummer, they didn't use the word bummer. But this goes, when you think of transportation planning, it goes to all levels of the city, even how we make announcements, right? And so filtering this past just public works and community planning, but getting to public relations and communications, there's all sorts of details that it matters. And I thought this was a good illustration, not to be critical of everyone, but starting to reinforce how transportation systems hit every aspect of the city. We shouldn't be blocking bike lanes for putting a sign out for transportation. We shouldn't be blocking bike lanes, period, right? And so it's just a different level and shows the depth of what the transportation master plan really needs to deal with. So what is a mobility audit in terms of it's an independent assessment of the community? So this is going to be a quick overview of what we've sort of studied. So the first question we ask is who's moving around Golden, right? And so we have the age range. And we have 16% of the population that's under 18. We have 72% of the population between 18 and 65, and then 11% 65 and older. You want to start thinking about the entire community. Sometimes transportation planners don't do that, right? If you think of a lot of communities, they focus just on vehicles and vehicles traveled. But this isn't necessarily about commuting, it's about how the community moves around. And so knowing that there's a lot of users who may not drive are important factors to consider. Household income. 80% of the Golden community is above the poverty level, 20% is below. So there's 20% of the population that their mobility choices are very different than the rest of the communities, and we have to be cognizant of that in the decisions that we make. Vehicle ownership is a reflection of that. 7% of the households in Golden have no vehicle. 35% only have one car, where 59% have two cars. So understanding the full profile of the community is really important to understand. Who's moving around Golden? It's not just the demographic makeup, but let's look at the resident population of Golden, the people who live here. Everyone always concerned about cut-through traffic and what's going on, right? Well, actually, only 12% of the residents of Golden actually work in Golden. 80% work outside of Golden. So there's a lot of need to get in and out of Golden just for your residents. When you look at employees, only 5% of the employment or the jobs in Golden are occupied by residents of Golden. 95% of the jobs in Golden are employing people from outside of the city. So there's a lot of flushing going on. Residents are leaving the city, employees are coming in, contributing to the mobility. But understanding that starts to frame some of your priorities and some of your understanding. It's not just about residents of Golden moving around Golden. It's about employees getting into Golden. It's about residents getting out of Golden just for their daily jobs. What percent of them do they commute? 9% of our residents commute by walking, 2% by bike, 3% take transit, 70% drive alone, and then 6% carpool, and then 11% work at home or other. Employees coming into the community, 4% walk. They must be living really close, right? On the edge in Jeffco. 1% bike, 1%, only 1% takes transit. So it tells you, your transit is accessible to the region, but not necessarily to your community. It starts to give you reflection inside. 82% drove alone. And so it starts to break up on understanding who's actually using the road, or the roads, or the transportation network. Now this is a graphic that you've seen these all before, but we wanted to frame it. This is the trip types. So we went and used big data. There's a big data vendor called Streetlight. Big data is everything that's on your phone. We can learn a lot about a community now. They track cell phones, not individuals, but the data that the phone, they may be tracking individuals, we didn't, so just to fight that. Of all the trips, every phone in Golden, on how they're going around, only 24% stayed within Golden. They're internal trips. So your origin and destination were in Golden. That's where all the phones were. Nearly 50%, 46. So we're looking at the morning peak, the PM peak, and then the total. So I'm looking at the column to the right. 46% of all the travel going on in Golden either had an origin or a destination in Golden, but not both. That's the flushing, right? That's the employees coming into the city. It's the residents leaving the city during the day. That's almost 50% of all trips are using the roads to do that. Only 30%. Now this is normal in terms of cut through compared to other communities. 30% have neither an origin or a destination in Golden. They're passing through. They're going from Boulder to Lakewood. They're going from the Canyon to Denver, but they're passing through your community. And looking at what roads, we also looked at what percent the traffic was a local trip, either having an origin or destination in Golden, and we mapped that on your roads. And to speak honestly, the road system's doing a good job. The majority of the regional trips are happening on the regional roads. US 6, 93, 58, Colfax, that's really where the regional trips are happening. They're not on Ford or others in comparison to percentages. Of course, every road has varying percentages, but the highest percentages are on the roads that are meant to be regional roads. Growth. So that's sort of who's using it. Now some key findings. How much growth? Because growth in Golden itself is a critical factor. Growth in Golden is very limited. We see about, according to the growth projections that the Denver region has given to Golden, that's based on the city's comprehensive plan, what's allowed to develop, as well as market trends for the region. About 7,000 jobs are anticipated over the next 20 years to come into Golden. Predominantly focusing on 4 areas: North Boulder, McIntyre, downtown, and then South Golden near the county government center in South Golden. Residential growth, where is that going to occur? Similar spots, North Golden and South Golden. So they see in their growth projection about 2,000 more homes will get into Golden in 20 years. Is the projection. So we factored that into our transportation model to understand how people are growing about. And then we looked regionally. I don't have this map. Regional growth is not as much as people think. Arvada, Northwest is really the growth area that's influencing Golden, and we don't see that as a major contributor to growth. That growth up in Northwest Arvada is anticipated and modeled in our forecast. So we know that's coming, but Lakewood's not growing, the mountain towns aren't growing in terms of, and then you're up against the open space. So Arvada is really the regional growth factor that's really influencing the city of Golden from a traffic transportation perspective other than your own growth. Roadway safety and congestion. So in looking at this, when we look at operational efficiencies of road, we're looking at safety and congestion. So safety concerns really focus around the intersections. Intersections where the most conflict points occur. We have predominantly the highest crash locations are on US 93 and US 6 because they have the highest volumes. But we do have a number of sites along Ford and within the city that we're concerned about, and we've mapped those out based on the traffic forecast and historic crash rates. From a vehicle congestion perspective, you're doing really well, right? Internal to the city of Golden. Highway 93 is your biggest problem, along with US 6 at Heritage. There is congestion along Washington with downtown. Not sure there's anything to overcome. This is a 20-year forecast. The biggest congestion points are really the Heritage intersection and what it causes on US 6, and then 93 all through northern half of the town are really where we anticipate a lot of congestion to occur.
4th Street northbound is usually locked up for 2 blocks.
Okay. From a traffic level of service, US 93 is probably is caused by a lot of what 93 is doing and trying to get in and out. From a transit perspective, you have good coverage. About 25% of the town is within a 5-minute walk of transit, which is pretty good given the size and scope of the transit service that you have. However, McIntyre employment area is not served at all. In fact, a route was taken away. We heard from a number of employers out there that they're becoming less and less competitive because they don't have transit, in terms of they need to have multimodal transportation, transit available to potential employees so they can compete with regional employers for just recruiting employment. So McIntyre area is really underserved. The FlexRide provides good frequency. However, the biggest thing we noted is access to and from transit. You have great regional transit down at the county, can't get to it. From bike ped perspective, the density of it kind of misses the core of Golden from a transit perspective. The transit service, the walking environment, getting to transit is really the critical next step besides improving access and frequency. You have good frequency on the FlexRide, but not on the rest of the routes serving Golden. They're at 30 minutes. The Flex is at 15. From a bicycle network, this is kind of a no-duh. Your local streets are great. 70% of your streets are what we would call comfortable. We did a stress level for them. They're working from a bicycling perspective, 70%. However, this is kind of the no-duh. Your busier streets, your collectors and the arterials are struggling from a stress and comfort level and may not be attractive alternatives. And the biggest thing to note is where you may have bicycle facilities today, they're still exceeding what we would recommend as stress levels. So we encourage you to rethink how you look at bike facilities, right? Conventional bike lanes is just a stripe on the road. There's no buffer on Ford. There looks to be room on Ford to rethink how you design that bike facility. Instead of having shoulders on each side, maybe you push the paint to one side and start to create a buffer and do some specific things to rethink your bicycle network. Your bicycle plan has great coverage and vision, but we need to stay up with the Joneses in terms of bicycle facilities that create more buffer and more comfortable rides. And we have examples of what those are. From a pedestrian perspective, the majority of streets are walkable. Obviously, the neighborhood streets are walkable, but the intersections are barriers. And I think there needs to be a deliberate strategy to start dealing with intersections, both from a bicycling perspective, vehicle safety perspective, and pedestrian perspective, and a systematic program to look at intersections, because that's really where the biggest challenge is from a pedestrian perspective. However, over time, a lot of your streets are historic and they have undersized sidewalks. While they are walkable, they can be better and they can be rebalanced. And what we're seeing is the right-of-way should be reprioritized towards the pedestrian on many of these streets. However, that is a slow, systematic process, and there's no immediate action. Those are as the age of the pavement gets to an age that the road has to rebuild. We would encourage you to rethink how that street right-of-way is laid out, but there's no reason to take immediate action until that road needs a new life. They were built, unfortunately, more towards car-oriented with undersized sidewalks. You do have a sidewalk. However, over time, we should be systematic, much like the intersections, to reprioritize many of those local streets. So that's sort of an overview. And the last thing I wanted to say is we actually looked at your budget and we looked at the history of the budget and where the city is allocating the funding, and we think the city's doing a great job. They've really balanced all modes. In fact, you're doing much better than most communities in creating bicycle and pedestrian friendly and traffic calming strategies and investing in transit. You're sort of at the position. However, we think the city can do a better job, and maybe this master plan can do it, is communicating that back. A lot of times, pedestrian investments or bicycle investments or local investments are put on hold for big regional projects because they have to do a local match. So I'll give you an example, Washington. That is sort of held up other parts of the city as funding needed to go into that because you had a regional partnership to accomplish that project. Similarly, 19th Street overpass over US 6, great project, kind of consumed the city budget for a while, but they were very prudent because they matched federal dollars. And so from a budgeting process, we do think there was great alignment between what we heard from the community, what we see and how the budgeting priority is done, as what we heard from stakeholders. Great alignment. However, the communication of that, you go into the budget, it's very hard to discern where sidewalk pedestrian improvements are. They're hidden under asphalt or they're hidden under concrete. And so it's very hard to figure it out unless you're within staff. So that's some of our critical assessment is really how the city communicates its priorities. And then lastly, there is no central guiding document, and that's why we're doing this master plan. So the community and staff can sort of fall back and see what are we trying to accomplish. So that's a very quick overview of our assessment. Now we have lots of ideas where projects are needed and where they can go, and we certainly can get into those, but we'd rather hear from you because you have different perspectives. So tonight's exercise is threefold. We're going to be wonky, deliberately wonky, because we have to help City Council prioritize projects. So much like the comprehensive plan, there's a vision. And from that vision, it creates goals. And those goals create measures of success. And that's what we'll judge projects against. And we can do it to help prioritize projects, but also look back at projects over the years to see how we're doing in accomplishing those goals. And so we have specific items we want to talk about. First is the vision statement. This is the most difficult part of any planning exercise. But note, this is a planning exercise, not an engineering exercise, to which everyone's voice matters. And if we have a common goal to what we want to achieve, then we can create plans to accomplish them. So this is not meant to be discussed in a larger group. It's meant to be edit, edit, edit. So we want to hear your edit. So I'm going to read this once, and sort of this is our draft. We're throwing it out on a table for people then to edit and improve and constantly improve. But this is the guiding document. Say, does it meet the objectives of what we really want a transportation system to do? So our draft vision statement here is Golden's mobility network enhances the city's unique small-town character by interconnecting our residents, employees, and visitors to the region, the city, our neighborhoods, and open spaces through investments are walkable, bikeable, and transit supportive. Yay, blue sky, right? Grandma and cookies, we all love it. That's the point. Now, if we're missing something, it's very important to help us. So we have a board back here with the vision statement. A, do you agree with it or not? Well, you vote. We have dots for you to vote on. If you don't agree with it or you want to edit it, please do. And so we have Post-it notes that you can help us think through this. Now, this is abstract. We could be missing equity to the neighborhoods or economic development or a specific mode or safety concerns. This is not meant to be perfect. It will become perfect when we hear everyone's thoughts on it. But as we move down from the big picture, think of it as a funnel, from a 30,000-foot level, now we're starting to narrow it down. This is how engineers and planners get along. Engineers just hope that the planners eventually get to a curb, but we use big words as planners, and we start to think of it as a funnel, and you start to aim everyone in the same direction. So from that vision, we start to create goals, and those what we're calling core values. And so we have three sort of core values: safe and connected, livable and resilient, prudent and equitable. And now, what is safe and connected, right? That's meant to be vague. But then you can get specific in how we measure it. Livable and resilient. Well, that doesn't sound like transportation. That sounds like land use, right? Or efficient use of resources or creating redundancies. Yes, because every time you spend a transportation dollar, you're impacting land use and community character. So you can't make a transportation decision without thinking about that first. And then prudent and equitable. Prudent is, are we fiscally responsible? We don't have all the money in the world, so how are we spending that money? And equitable, well, that's equity. Are we serving everyone? equitably and everyone who has a chance to get served? Are we focusing on one part of the neighborhood or one something? That's what we want to distribute transportation improvements throughout the city. So in the back, we actually have more to it than those. Then you think of one of them, and I don't know if I have it on here. One of them is about predictable travel. What is predictable travel? Predictable travel, instead of, if you're like me coming to Golden today, predictable travel says that's guaranteed 45-minute trip. Shouldn't be an hour and a half. It's an hour and a half. US 6 is under construction. There was no other alternative. They were down to one lane. It was really tough getting out of there, and I was using Google Apps. Unfortunately, everyone in the Denver region is using Google Apps, and every route out to Golden was. That's not predictable, the wide range of 30 minutes down to an hour and a half. That's not reliable. And so what reliable transportation is it a predictable outcome. It doesn't mean it's fast. Doesn't mean it's slow. It has no bias. It's predictable. And so there's measures that are out in the industry that we can use to measure travel time for all modes of travel. In terms of what does it take to get from point A to point B, we can pick a specific corridor or point to point that the city then can use using big data to measure that. And both we can start to prioritize which corridors are the least predictable versus which corridors are the most predictable. That's a variable that can start to tell you how to prioritize projects. So in the back, under each of these core values, we want you to read them. We want you to then tweak and say what sort of measures you think accomplishes. If you don't think what we put out here accomplishes those measures, redline it. Let us know. Have a conversation with us about it. But this is really what, quite frankly, you think the engineers are all having fun? Or the planners? They're really not. They're really looking at travel time and measures of success because they have to go to town council and the city manager to tell them which project should come first or second. And so this gets really, you're now getting into the heads of the planning department and the engineering department on how do they prioritize the project. So that's the first exercise, and it's the wonkiest, I have to admit. But then we go into the second, and so we have dots. You vote on the vision and the core values, and then you edit, just as I said. The second are projects. So the second station are actual projects going through, and there's different scales of project. We're going to sort of introduce you to our language, right? So in the vertical axis and how we look, eventually the budget will be, these are the vision and the core values are here along with cost, time, right? That's the vertical axis. The horizontal axis is the scale of the project. There's a very big difference between a neighborhood roundabout and the 19th Avenue overpass, right? So we broke them up in the scale. There's regional projects, there's citywide projects, there's neighborhood projects, and there's open space projects. Giving you examples, the 19th Street overpass is a regional project. Heritage intersection is a regional project. US 93 is a regional project. Citywide projects, hey, what if we connected a new transit route that went from the Jeffco Government Center, the Taj, out to Ward Road. So we could actually connect the Gold Line to the West Line. So all the employees or potential employees or visitors that are out in Arvada, in Thornton, in Westminster, they can actually get here quicker. If we actually had they could take the Gold Line to Ward, get off at Ward, take a bus in, actually serve your employment district in McIntyre, come into downtown and get over to the Taj. So the people in Lakewood or in Denver could then work in Arvada or work at McIntyre, more importantly, and sort of create a competitive advantage that you're providing all modes. So that's an example of a city project. That's not really a regional project as much. A neighborhood traffic calming project is really a neighborhood project. It's not necessarily a citywide project. And then obviously new trailheads, anything individual, bike plans, specific safety improvements in specific neighborhoods are more open space type of related projects. So that's the scale of the project. So what are each of the boards? Each of the boards in the back are by mode of travel: pedestrian, bicycle, transit, and car. There's really only 4 modes of travel. Each board shows where we think there are deficiencies for that mode of travel. So if you go to the bicycle board, we have our stress map, and we have your bicycle facilities. And very quickly, some of your bicycle facilities are stressful, and so they may need revisions. So we have example project types as the third one, as the second one, to show you what are candidate projects that could be considered, and then your expertise on that subject. If you're bicycling advocates, like the person who made the comment about the sign in the bike lane, and you just want to hang out around the bike page, you're more than welcome. But we know you move around Golden on all modes. So visit every station. Every station is the same. We have a deficiency map, we have example projects, and then we have where you put your suggestions down. You can draw on the map. Most importantly, we have these spots that you can put sticky notes on the type of project. So each station will have a team liaison, either from the city or the consultant team, to have conversations and help you think through. We have projects listed in some of those pictures to start you off thinking in the right direction. And so for the highway, one example is the 93 bypass. If you think of the 93 bypass, is that good or bad? Well, it's both. Network is always, more roads are always better than less roads because you can distribute the traffic and resize them. So the 93 bypass gives you an opportunity to reclaim old 93 and better connect North Golden to the heart of Golden. And so there's positives and negatives to it, but we have example projects that we're certainly going to take the lead on after these meetings for you to respond to, but we want to get your feedback to add to that, make sure we're not missing something. So that's the second station. And then the last, and you don't have to go in order. You don't, because then it'll be really slow at the first station. So spread out. And then the last one is the budgeting exercise. And think of budget, right? You think of the 93 or the 19th Avenue overpass, upper 20s in millions to accomplish that. The bridge deck was enormous, rightfully so. It better connected the communities of Lookout Mountain to the community. There's wonderful assets. The bridge itself, lowering the freeway, was very expensive. So I think it was like $25, $27 million in that order of magnitude range. So that's a regional impact. The reason we like that project, because it addressed congestion, but more importantly, it accomplished so much more in terms of connecting the community, creating bicycle improvements on 19th, and most importantly, getting Lookout Mountain, that community, closer to the heart of Golden, and not having US 6 be the barrier that it was. So there's a lot of open space improvements in the 19th Avenue overpass, neighborhood improvements, as well as citywide improvements that occurred in one project. Now that project consumed a big percentage of the budget. So we have circles in size. So those regional projects are 1 million or way more than 1 million. I don't, order of magnitude, Rick, Heritage and US 6.
As far as cost?
Yeah.
25 to $30 million.
Similar to the 19th Street overpass. So think of your annual capital improvement budget. It's very expensive to do a regional project, so they're not going to come along every day. The majority of your projects are going to be neighborhood scale or city scale. So when you go to the budgeting table, we have two scenarios. Scenario one is a typical budgeting year. You're going to get 5 dots. That's all you get. You don't get 6 dots. Even if you're really nice to me, we're not giving you 6 dots. And we have the 3 project types. There is no regional project that's allocated for that budget year, where we don't need to match DRCOG, Denver Regional Council of Governments grant, or the Colorado Department. There's no matching. This is your typical funding year in the city of Golden that staff and council have to decide. With those $5, you can decide how you want to allocate them. So you can, this is just an example, in this scenario, all city projects are 3 dots, or $3. So if you want a pedestrian scale project, it's $3 for a city project. It's 2 dots. For a neighborhood project, it's 1 dot. So you can do 5 open space projects and nothing else. That's your prerogative. It's how you spend your money. If you want to do neighborhood projects, you can do 2, and then probably 1 open space project. And then if you do want a city project, and we can help you think through scale, but we actually want to know what projects you're thinking about. And so we can talk about scale. But you only have 5 dots, and that's going to help us say what's most important to you. Are they all sort of neighborhood projects, or are they city scale projects? And so when you have a project in mind, we can certainly say, well, that is a $2 project or a $3 project. The last exercise in the budget is the second scenario, where there's a unique regional opportunity. Suddenly we received a grant for the Heritage and US 6 intersection. Right? And so you still have your same 5 dots, but they have to be allocated differently. You have to spend 2 dots on operations and improvements. So you only have 3 dots left. So we're going to make you spend the money on the operational safety improvements of the corridor, and then what sort of attributes do you want to go with it? Now you could, put all the money into capacity improvements, or you could say 2 dots go to capacity, 2 go to pedestrian and bike, and 1 goes to pedestrian, 2 go to bike or transit. So how you spread that money out is really important to note. But you are constrained by the regional project because it consumes your budget. You can't spend it all on open space if we have to spend money on a regional project. And again, the exercise is to put you in the head of council, wow, prudent use of dollars, should we spend our money to get this big local or state match or federal match versus just constantly spending our money? So we just wanted to put you into those 2 different scenarios. So that is it. There's a lot, but we have representatives for each station for the bike, ped, transit projects, as well as the core values. And we're not going to, if you have any individual questions, come up to me and chat, but we really want to get you to the boards. So with that, thank you for coming, and it's really about the board exercises.